Hello everyone. Hope you are all staying safe at your home. Now are going to start as a managerial remuneration. This chapter basically comes as a 5 marker for practical, or there is one 15 marker theoretical question that what are the various guidelines which are given by Companies Act 2013 for managerial remuneration. But the chances of these two questions are rather less. There is one question which comes in 15 marks in practical of the next chapter, final accounts of companies. So in that chapter, or in the question from that chapter, you can expect one part or one point based on this whole chapter. That is why it should be done first before doing the next chapter, final accounts of companies. The chances, I am again repeating, are equal for these two. You can expect 5 marker question as it was there in the last year exam, May 2019. You can expect a 15 marker theoretical question, but it was asked once only. However, it comes as a part to a 15 marker practical question of next chapter, final accounts of companies. Now, managerial remuneration, you have done a part of it in your first semester exams as well when we were dealing with financial accounting. In the final accounts, there was one adjustment that the remuneration or the managerial remuneration is 5% of net profits after charging remuneration or before charging remuneration. Certain types of adjustments were given to you in those questions. Actually, that part is related to this chapter, managerial remuneration. In this chapter, we will be dealing in detail all the provisions which have been given by the Companies Act 2013 regarding the maximum amount of remuneration which you can give in any year to a particular category of worker. Worker here, I mean the manager. Now, manager term includes many further terms in it. It includes the directors, managers, and managing director of any financial company. Now, directors or managers can be whole-time directors, can be part-time directors, but it includes managerial remuneration includes these three terms: directors, manager, and managing director. So, whatever the remuneration which you pay to these three categories of persons is dealt under Companies Act 2013. But basically, what does this remuneration means? This remuneration means any expenditure incurred by the company in providing any rent-free accommodation or any other benefits or amenity in respect of accommodation free of charge to any managerial personnel. It means that these three are your managerial personnel. If you provide any of the rent-free accommodation or facilities to rent-free accommodation to these three persons, that is called remuneration. Any expenditure incurred by the company in providing any other benefit or amenity free of charge or at concessional rate. Now, if you provide any further facility or benefit to any of these three managerial personnel, either at zero charge or at concessional rate, again that amount is called your remuneration. Next, any expenditure incurred by the company in respect of any obligation or service. Any obligation or service which, but for such expenditure by the company, would have been incurred by any of the managerial personnel. Means, if any of your managerial personnel is going to incur any expense, but on behalf of the managerial personnel, those expenses have been incurred by the company. Now, if the payment is made by the company, that amount is always the remuneration. I'm again repeating this point. Any expenditure incurred by the company in respect of any obligation or service, which but for such expenditure by the company would have been incurred by any managerial personnel. Any facility or obligation which used to be paid by the managerial personnel but here is paid by the company is part of remuneration. Next point, any expenditure incurred by the company to effect any insurance on the life of or to provide any pension, annuity, and gratuity for any managerial personnel or his spouse or child. So, if the company provides insurance facility, gratuity, annuity, or pension facility to the managerial personnel, to his spouse, or his child, are all the part of managerial remuneration. Now, gratuity is again a benefit which is given by the company to the persons who are working with them, to the managerial persons working with them. Annuity and pension are again the extra benefits given by the company. So, your remuneration which you charge to P&L includes all these four expenses which the company incurs on behalf of its managerial personnel. Managerial personnel can be of any of these three categories. The directors can be full-time, part-time. Managers can be full-time, part-time. That does not matter, but these expenses are all covered. Now, Companies Act 2013 has a specific section for this purpose, that is 197. It says that the total remuneration which is payable by the company to these three managerial personnel should not exceed 11% of the net profits of that company. That means there is one director, one manager, and one managing director to any company. So the total remuneration is supposed to be paid to these three persons. The payment to be made on account of remuneration to these three persons should not exceed 11% of the net profits of one financial year, any financial year. That is the total limit or the restriction which the Companies Act has provided on the managerial remuneration. Now, one important note is here. It shall, however, exclude any fee payable to the directors for attending the meeting of the board or a committee thereof. If any of the expenses are being incurred by the managerial personnel for the attending the meetings, then that part should not be the part of managerial remuneration. Those are excluded from the remuneration which is being provided. So this is the main meaning of managerial remuneration. The next part is that when the company is supposed to make payment to the managerial personnel, or what are the basic conditions which the managerial personnel are supposed to fix or fulfill to get a remuneration. The conditions are again laid by Companies Act 2013. According to this act, no person shall be eligible for appointment as a managing or whole-time director or a manager of a company unless and until all these conditions are not fulfilled. He had not been sentenced to imprisonment for any period or to a fine exceeding rupees 1000 for the conviction of an offence under any of the mentioned acts. Means if that the personnel which you are going to hire should not be imprisoned till now and should not be charged with a penalty exceeding rupees 1000. He had not been detained for any period under the Conservation of Foreign Exchange and Prevention of Smuggling Acts 1974. The first point says that there are some mentioned acts. The first act is Conservation of Foreign Exchange and Prevention of Smuggling Activities. So the person should not have violated the provisions of these acts. He has completed the age of 21 years and does not attain the age of 70 years. That means the maximum limit is 70 and the minimum one is 21 years. Where he is a managerial person in more than one company, he withdraws remuneration from one or more companies subject to the ceiling provided. Means that if there is any managerial personnel A and he is working as a director to two companies, X Limited and Y Limited, it means that if the managerial remuneration to any one party is 3 lakh from this and 3 lakh from this, that means the total remuneration earned by A is 6 lakh. However, it should not be the case. Companies Act 2013 has specified the maximum amount of remuneration which any one party can earn from all the companies where he is working. So, if the maximum limit of the party to earn remuneration is rupees 30 lakhs, then the total amount of 30 lakhs will be contributed partially by X Limited and partially by Y Limited. A cannot earn the whole amount from X 30 and the whole amount from Y 30 lakhs. Rather, in total 30 lakhs will be contributed half by X and half by Y. He is the resident of India. This is the main point which should be there for being appointed as a managerial person or managerial personnel. Now the calculation of managerial remuneration is basically done on the net profit which the company has earned during any of the financial year. However, the company may earn losses or may incur losses or may earn profits in any of the financial year. So depending upon the two conditions, the managerial remuneration varies. If the company is incurring a loss, the amount of managerial remuneration is less, and if the company is earning a very good profit, then the limits on managerial remuneration are something else. Let's study those out. So we are having two cases with us: when the company has adequate profits and when the company has no profits or adequate profits. That means the company is in a position of loss. The maximum limit depends on these two cases. The first case is when the company has adequate profits. In that case, as we have already done, that overall managerial remuneration, which can be paid by any one company to all the managerial personnel, is 11% of net profit. However, it does not include any fees on account of attending the meetings. The second is if the company has only one whole-time director or managing director or manager. Then the maximum limit, that means if the whole company is having only one person as the manager, the maximum amount of remuneration is 5% of net profit. And if the company has more than one, here it is one, here is more than one whole-time director or managing director or manager, then the amount payable is 10% of net profit. Remuneration of part-time directors. If there is no managing director or whole-time director, 3% of net profit. If there is managing or whole-time director, it is 1% of net profit. These are the certain limits which you have to learn. But if you get a question, obviously the rates must be given to you in the question. Only one rate you are supposed to learn is the maximum limit is 11%. Rest will always be given to you. However, for theoretical part, learn this whole table very well. If there is one person who is acting as all, then maximum is 5. If there are more than one, then it can be 10% to all the persons who are acting. And if there are part-time directors, then the maximum limit is 3% and minimum is 1. 3% is applicable when though you are having part-time directors, but you are not having managing director or whole-time director. And if you are having managing director and whole-time director as well, the remuneration payable to part-time directors is only 1% of net profit. This is the case when you have adequate profits with you. Now let's have the case when the company has no profits or adequate profits with him to pay the remuneration. Now, if in case of no profits or adequate profits, the managerial remuneration can be paid on the basis of effective capital of the company. Now this point is very important as effective capital of the company. Effective capital of the company means the formula is given to you: paid up share capital plus securities premium plus reserve surplus, excluding any revaluation reserve, any long-term loans or deposits like debentures, minus investment, minus accumulated losses, minus preliminary expenses. The total of all this is called the effective capital. And on the basis of effective capital, you will be given the remuneration in case of no profits or adequate profits. However, when there were adequate profits, remuneration was given on the basis of net profit. I am again repeating. In case of adequate profits, it was given on the basis of net profit. However, in the case when no adequate profits are there with you, then it is given on the basis of effective capital. Now the various rates are: where the effective capital of the company is less than 5 crores, then yearly payment of remuneration should be equal to 30 lakhs and should not exceed this amount, or it can be lesser than this. 5 crores and till 100 crores, but not above than that, 42 lakhs. If the limit is 100 crores to 250 crores, 60. And if it exceeds 250 crores and above, then 60 lakhs plus 0.01% of the effective capital in excess of 250 crores. So, if your total capital is 330 crores, and we know that the capital limit is given to us as 250, so you will be given 60 lakhs as first remuneration. and 0.01% of the effective capital in excess of 250. So the capital in excess of 250 here turns out to be 80 crores. So 0.01% of 80 crores plus 60 lakh will be given to you as the managerial remuneration, and no amount more than that can be given. This is the meaning of effective capital. It means the aggregate of paid up share capital, amount standing to the credit of share premium account, reserves and surplus, excluding revaluation reserve, long-term loans and deposits, repayable after 1 year as reduced by aggregate of investment, accumulated losses and preliminary expenses not written off. Expenses should not be written off. This is the meaning of the formula which we have done till now. So these are the two cases when the managerial remuneration is being given. Now, what is the formula, or what are the various methods or approaches through which you can calculate the managerial remuneration? Basically, the managerial remuneration is determined on the basis of profit and loss account which you prepare. Firstly, we will be doing the items which are included and the items which are not included or which are excluded. Then we will do the methods, because methods are almost the same as another. The way of presentation is different. As we have done that, basically the managerial remuneration depends upon the amount of net profit. But how you will be calculating the net profit for this purpose? Net profit for the purpose of computing managerial remuneration shall be ascertained according to the provisions of Section 198 of Companies Act 2013. This explains various items of incomes and expenses which are to be considered, and items and expenses which are not to be considered. So all the items of incomes and expenses which are to be included and which are to be excluded are given in detail under Section 198 of Companies Act 2013. Now, what does this Section 198 specifies? That incomes which you are going to includes gross profit plus bounties and subsidies received from government or any public authority. So these two should be the total, or should be the part of managerial remuneration. Gross profit. Now, what does the gross profit includes? It is the sales minus COGS, and can be calculated by preparing the trading account. So gross profit plus any of the subsidies or bounties. Bounties means the extra amount which you receive from government or any public authority. And items or incomes not to be included. You will not include premium on issue of shares or debenture. We know that SPR is not posted in P&L account, so not included. Profit on sale of forfeited shares. Even we do not post capital reserve to P&L account. Profit of a capital nature, including profits from the sale of undertaking or of any part thereof, means we do not include profit on the sale of any business in the P&L account. Yes, we do not post this income there. Profit on sale of immovable property or fixed asset. That if you earn on the any profit on account of immovable property or fixed asset, you do not include any item. But we generally post these items in P&L account, because there is one exception over here. You will not be posting these 4 items, but you can post this one item while calculating the managerial remuneration on account of net profit. Provided that where the amount for which any fixed asset is sold exceeds its written down value, credit shall be given so much of the expense as is not higher than the difference between the original cost of the fixed asset and its written down value. This statement is very important and very crucial for your practical. You can't understand this without the help of any example. So let's have the look at the example first. Let's suppose the original cost of the fixed asset is 2 lakhs and its written down value is 1,20,000. So they have given to you that the total value of the asset when you purchased it was 2 lakh. However, at present the written down value is rupees 1,20,000. If you sell the item here at 1,70,000, then you have incurred a profit of 170 minus 120, that is 50,000. You will include this profit while calculating the net profits. Second case, Now WDV is 1,20,000, but you have sold the asset for 1,95,000. So the difference between the two is 75,000. Your profit again to be included. Next case, the asset is sold for 2 lakh. Difference of 2 is rupees 80 lakhs. And you must notice that the original cost is also 2 lakhs. The difference is of 80. That amount is to be included. Next case is the asset is sold for 2,25,000. The difference between these two amount is 105,000. But one point is different here, that the value of 2,25,000 is higher than the original cost of the asset. Here, the written down value, the difference between the sale price, that is 225, and 1,20,000, that is WDB, is 105,000. So total profit is 105,000, which should be included as per these three examples. But here we cannot include this whole amount because the difference between the sale price and the total cost is more, that is, it is rupees 25,000. You have sold the item for a higher price than the basic item. Therefore, you will post only the amount of 80,000 and not the 25,000. 25,000. Now, how come rupees 80,000? 1,05,000 minus 25,000 is 80,000. You cannot post any amount greater than the original cost. The amount greater than the original cost is 25,000. Therefore, out of rupees 1,05,000, 25,000 will not be posted, but 80,000 will be included. Next case, the total amount for which it is sold is 240. Now the difference between 240 and WDB is 120, but the asset is sold for a higher value than original cost by 40,000. Therefore, out of 1,20,000, 40,000 will not be included and 80,000 will be included. So the amount not to be included is 40,000. Now there is the list of expenses which should be deducted from your profit while calculating it for the managerial remuneration. These are normal, just like you charge to P&L account. Any of the usual working charges like electricity, rent, printing stationery, telegram charges, postage charges, director's remuneration, bonus or commission paid or payable to employees of the company, interest on debentures, loans and advances interest, repair expenses, provided that the repair is not of capital nature, only of revenue nature. We always post only the repair of revenue nature to our P&L. Contributions made under section 181 to any of the charitable or other funds. Depreciation to the extent of the act. Depreciation will be deducted, but only to the extent given by section 123. Now this section is for the purpose of income tax calculation. You will be charging depreciation only to the limits decided by this act. Any compensation or damage which is paid in virtue of any legal liability, including any liability arising from a breach of contract. So if you have violated any provisions, you haven't paid any penalty for the same, those will be charged. Any sum paid by insurance against the risk or debts considered bad or written off. We always charge bad debts, we always charge new provision. So we have already done this in your first semester. Now there are expenses which you are not supposed to deduct. Income tax is not to be deducted, any voluntary payment of compensation or damage, and loss of a capital nature, including loss on sale of undertaking or of any part thereof, but not including any expense of the written down value of any asset which is sold, discarded, demolished, or destroyed over its sale proceeds or its scrap value. Means, just like we have done this part, that means expenses not to be, incomes not to be included, we have done one part of profit. Though profit on sale of immovable assets is not the part of your net profit, but if such condition arises, then it is the part of your net profit. In the same way, loss on account of immovable property is not part. However, if you incur loss in such way, then it is to be included. For example, if the asset is sold for 70,000 here, The difference between the two is 50,000. That is your loss, must be deducted while calculating. So this part says loss of capital nature, including loss on sale of undertaking or any part of thereof. So it should not be deducted, but not including any excess of the written down value of any asset. If your written down value of your asset is higher than your sale price, then that loss is to be subtracted. So these are the basic provisions which you are supposed to learn and revise again and again so that you don't make any mistake while attempting your question. Nextly, we are going to solve some questions. 2 questions are sufficient to solve for the practice of this chapter.